You're gonna make me cry. I feel like we should give everyone here a round of applause for being early morning risers. So like, really, thank you. I am not an early morning riser, or I would have been here a million times already. So this is really a great way to bring me out. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, the entire team here. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Is this, okay, we're working, okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit, the theme is cycles, and I'm all about cycles. And one of the books that I read early on was called Spiral Dynamics, and I ended up owning 2 businesses with Spiral in the name. Spiral Circle Bookstore and Spiral Spectrum is a line of astrology calendars that I make. So, but a lot of my interest in Spiral Dynamics is from a book called Spiral Dynamics. I think I got it at Spiral Circle Bookstore before I owned it. And it's a model of the evolutionary development of individual organizations and societies. So there's like a repeating pattern. And if you will, kind of like a maturation process or a process that every person, every individual, every society kind of goes through. And it's usually a predictable path. But a lot of us are just stuck in the everyday, and so we're not looking out at the big picture, but that's kind of one of the things that I do is look at the big picture. So that is a really important thing. So I'm going to start where my life begins, and the stars were aligning. This is not me because I'm a middle child and I don't actually have photos of myself as a child. But that's pretty much how grumpy I came out. The story is that my mom was told that I was not getting enough nutrients or something like that. And so they had to induce her, which turns out not to be true because he just wanted to go on vacation. But she had a really hard labor with me because they induced me to save me. And the doctor kept putting the Pitocin up and the nurses kept turning it down. And so she had this like really terrible experience. So I was basically like forced out of my comfortable home before I was ready, under like a complete misunderstood like situation. And then, you know, like my dad said, yeah, when he pulled you out, he was like, oh, wasted. He's like, you were fine. There was nothing wrong with you. So like there was like this whole thing going on, and that pattern has repeated my whole damn life. I will tell you that. But I will tell you, I have a Leo sun, which this is the most Leo presentation you'll ever see. And also, importantly, I have Mars and Venus and Pluto in Libra, which is the scales of justice and harmony. So that is a lot of where I get my interest in. I have a big interest in social justice and equality and community and things like that. So then we're going to fast forward. I'm going to tell you a few like important like aha moments for me. And this was in my elementary school era. I have no idea when. But this is when I was learning, they were teaching a lesson about like AD and BC because they still did that. I think they've changed it since I was a little kid. But they were explaining how Pope Gregory, I don't know, the 8th or something like that, maybe the 15th, who knows? There was a lot of Pope Gregorys. He reset time, based on the birth of Jesus, which was all very astrological. The Catholic Church has the biggest astrology library in the world, just so you know. But yeah, he reset time in the year 1558. He reset time to 0. Like it was like a really messed up thing, and I thought, wait a second, like I'm little. I didn't think you could manipulate time like that. It didn't even occur to me. And I was like, who has the power to just like snap their fingers and reset time and base it on some arbitrary date? We all know Jesus Christ was probably not, we don't even know when he was born, right? And then also the shifting of the pagan holidays it was like a whole thing. And I remember like looking around like, how come nobody else is freaking out right now? Like this seems like a really big thing. So that began my relationship with power and time that has pretty much persisted throughout my entire life. And then in middle school, I had another really, really important lesson, and this was the power of marketing. This is a recreation of a real event because, again, I'm a middle child, and there are no real photos of me from that era. And obviously, I was in middle school. This girl looks like she's in elementary school. But what happened was I had a neighbor. He was a really cool guy. The only thing I remember about him is that he had a twin. He was super smart, and we were both in the science fair. And I'm telling you right now, I don't have a science background. I'm not good at science. I don't know anything really about it. I don't even remember what I was presenting on. I think it was a pretty rote, like, basic science fair project, but I had really good graphics because I was, very creative in that way. So I had a really good presentation, and he had like chicken scratch on a poster board, and it was a good project. Like, it was an interesting project. He had the science was right. Like, he should have won first place, right? But I won first place, and we were both like, damn, what just happened, And I learned a really important, and I would want to say that he should have also learned the important lesson about learning how to present things in a way that could be accepted by a lot of different people. But as I am looking at the climate change scientists trying to explain climate change to everyone, I'm like, I don't think any of the scientists got the lesson. They're trying to use facts and data, and people are just not, they don't do that. They do emotions. So anyway, that's when I learned the power of marketing, and we both walked away from it because, I will to this day, his science project was definitely better than mine, but I just had better presentation. So that was kind of like a big aha for me. And then in high school, I learned the power of the press. I ended up becoming the editor of my high school paper. This is Clark Kent. This is the original Clark Kent for those of you that might be younger. This is how I started. It was actually Aldus PageMaker back then, and then they bought it and became Adobe. This is the literal computer that I used to use. And this is how we did, it was in black and white. It was crazy, you guys. And so that's how I began my design career. I think I started high school in '92. And so we didn't even have email until 1996, I don't think. So this was before all of that, and we were still doing paste ups. You would have to print it and use a crop ratio thing to photograph it, and then you had to paste it all up with glue sticks and then send the big thing to the printer. It was an insane process. But that is how I learned that's where my graphics career started. And that's also where I learned other things about the press. One was I wrote an article, on my walk home, there was this big sidewalk that just stopped in the middle of, there was no reason why it stopped there. And that ended up creating some civic change. I think that they ended up finishing the sidewalk. But I also learned about censorship because somebody on staff wrote about a store called Condomania, and it was, we were in Tallahassee, which is, the South. And I think my journalism teacher, she never confirmed this, but I think she wasn't teaching journalism the next year, I'll just say that. And I think it was because she let that article go through, and there was a little bit of a haboo about it. I also learned how to, I was such a good girl, I have to tell you, but my parents, again, I don't have any photos, so it was a different upbringing. And I wasn't allowed to go off campus with all the other people. So I had a computer and a printer access to, and I made myself an off-campus pass, and I also created these for other people, right? So I also learned how to use my resources in a way to subvert some stuff. And I got in big trouble for that. I think I got suspended maybe, I don't know. But I was a really good kid, so that was a big deal for me. So I learned 3 important lessons there about all of that. And then when I got to college, I went to UCF. I'm a business major. I graduated in business in 2001. But when I was there, I worked at the Campus Activities Board, which is the kind of the promotions department for student events. So I did all of the graphics and promotions for everything from the pageant to Adam Sandler, Oliver Stone, the Blues Traveler, all different kinds of things. I was in charge of the promotions for that. And all of this was self-taught, by the way. I literally just started learning PageMaker in high school, and then that got me a job on the Campus Activities Board. I also did an events calendar there. Calendars are also a common theme in my life. And so that was a really interesting thing. And so I learned how to use graphics to promote events. But I was also working at Kinko's. Who remembers Kinko's? Yeah. it had an amazing culture. This is Paul Orfila. He's the founder. He had, I don't know if you can see this, but he had dyslexia, ADHD, and a copy machine, apparently. But he built an incredible culture that became kind of like the blueprint and template for how I wanted to do business. They had a balance between work, love, and play. It was a very creative thing, and he was all about creating a really engaged workforce. He did profit sharing, so I learned everything I learned about business. I actually learned while I was working at Kinko's. Had a very diverse like staff. A lot of women were in management, which was not that common at the time. And so, of course, I was working in the graphics department, computer services, and later on, I became I was a baby. I was like 24, but I became the graphics. They eventually, they used to do, every Kinko's had a graphics person, and we did mostly resumes, honestly, but resumes, business cards, but sometimes a really cool project like marketing would come through. And then what they did is they consolidated all of that into one facility. I had like 10 people working for me, and we did all of the graphics for all of the Kinko's in Florida. Which was very interesting. So I also learned how to write a really good resume, but also how to take that copying and put it into a format. But also the business. Everyone I know, like I talk to, they know my love for my experience at Kinko's. And so Paul Orfila was a big inspiration. I actually reached out to him after, probably about 5 years ago, and I was just like, thank you so much. It was just an incredible experience. And then I was kind of in between. I was actually working in publishing after I left the design department because they wanted to outsource all of the design to India, which they ended up doing. And I fought them on that because I was like, different cultures have different, left to right, right to left. The colors, it's not going to translate, you guys. But they were getting ready to sell to FedEx, and so they were doing everything they could to get the bottom line in order. And so they did, I left, I could see the writing on the wall, and I ended up leaving. And I got into publishing. I'm actually a InDesign expert, or I was 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years. How old am I now? I'm really good at layout, and it is my passion, but I just don't get to practice it that much anymore. But we were like pouring textbooks using code, which is pretty freaking advanced. And so I love layout, and I use my layout skills now primarily when I'm doing website design for my businesses. But anyway, my sister had just passed away, and I just felt like, man, here I am doing things. And I mean, the publishing industry, it was textbooks for kids, and man, there was so much weird stuff going on in the textbook industry. We had to remove the udders from cows in California because it was too sexual or something like that. It was just really weird stuff that you could see how they were like people who didn't want, it was just really weird. And it was a weird, I had cool coworkers, but it was just it wasn't I was like, I feel like I should do something more, And I was talking to my friend, Damon, and he was like, well, why don't you go out and do your own graphic design thing? And I was like, I don't want to deal with clients. They all want me to do something, and I want to do what I want to do, And after a while, he was like, well, what is your favorite thing to do? I was like, I don't know, have dinner parties and listen to music, man, And he was like, that sounds like a restaurant. And I laughed, And then a week later, I'm driving around trying to find food. I had gone to Europe backpacking after college, and I decided that's where I learned about organic food, and I didn't have the vocabulary for it then, but local economies that were intact. And so I couldn't find an organic place to eat that was quick on my lunch break. I was getting really fat on the fried fish at this really good restaurant. So I was like, okay, let me do a restaurant, of course. That's obviously, I've never worked at one in my life, but that seems like something I can do. How hard can it be? So anyway, I just got this wild hair, and I really wanted to do something that was community focused, and I had this really great experience at Kinko's with a really cool culture. And so I began to put my design skills to literal work into my business. I created a branding. I don't have the logos up here right now, but my first logo was purposely kind of bad because I knew if I did it to the skill level I had, people wouldn't think it was like a folksy, homegrown, grassroots kind of place. So I actually did a really bad logo at first. And then later on, when social media became a thing, you needed to fit logos into a square. And so I then redid it, made it more mature, it looked nicer. But you know, I realized the power of design. I mean, we had really beautiful, you know, just, you know, ceilings, and there was Morgan Steele did a lot of arts and signage around, and we became very photogenic, which in the age of social media was a huge, you know, boon for me. And since then, since social media, we've seen businesses get more beautiful and creative inside because they know that they have to be photo ready. And so one of the other things that happened in the creation of this, I mean, it was all about community. I really wanted to know my neighbors. I really wanted to create strong local economies. I had done enough research to know that, you know, there could possibly be disruptions at some point in the future, understanding what I did about climate change and all these other different things. And I decided that the best way to get through something like that was to build a strong community. So I didn't like come out the gate and be like, we're all gonna be freaking out one day and we need to know each other. But I did host like green drinks and a lot of really cool things. Started at Dandelion, and it was an incredible time in my life. And one of the other things that we did there is moon circles. We had full and new moon drum circles. And so that was kind of a way for us to begin to shift from that Gregorian calendar, which time is not a line, it's a repeating pattern in a circle, and shift into a more rhythmic calendar. I mean, the calendar year used to be 13 months, and now it's 12 because there's 13 moon cycles in a solar year. And so the fact that we're kind of gridded to what I call an artificial timeline, like you think about artificial food, right? The time that we use on the calendar is actually just like it's shifting us out of natural rhythms, which I feel like is our first separation from nature. And I feel like that's a problem, but you know, we're in it and we're doing it and it's happening. So from there, I ended up discovering, of course, the power of place. And I co-founded an organization called Orlando. Here's another calendar that I did. And this was a way to start the idea of local first. And one of the things that we realized that we needed to do first was create pride of place. At that time, people were like, Orlando sucks. You know, it was just like, you know, it was a Gen X vibe, right? And so we were like, no, we need to celebrate what's going on here. We need to create pride of place. So we developed Orlando, and you know, it was a really fun time. A lot of independent business stuff was going on, and it was just a beautiful time. And people started to get engaged. I remember people would like come to Orlando and then move away. And I remember people. It was like this transition of people saying, oh, this is really cool, but I'm going to like Boulder, you know, or whatever. But then over the years, people would transition from this is cool, but I'm leaving to, oh, this is something interesting that's going on here. I'm going to stick around to, man, what can I do, right? How can I provide more for the community? And it all started with throwing parties, by the way. People don't like to be led by doom and gloom, but throwing parties, getting people together, having interesting conversations like you are here with this group. So that was all about the people party and the participation. I kept seeing this rhythm. Everybody would come in, and the mood would be, oh, we're all grumpy today, or the mood would be, we're all elated today. And I started to see these patterns play out on like this social level, and it was beyond coincidence. And then I started to see that pattern also with the development of things, right? And so then that's when I started to do Front Porch Radio. That's me with I'm so sorry it's pixelated. It just gets so big and then that happens. So I started Front Porch Radio, which I did for about 10 years on WPRK. That's my baby girl. Her name is Max. And that is where I got to have really cool conversations. It was a talk variety show for 1 hour a day. And that's, I mean, sometimes it was musicians. I know, Anna, you've been on there before. Sometimes it was artists, sometimes it was filmmakers, authors, sometimes it was just like, I had a group of moms on once and we all brought our babies and we were all like, this is what motherhood is like, you know? And so it was things that weren't very mainstream. I did a whole series on farm workers. I did an entire series on home birth. I did a series on early social justice stuff. And that's where I really learned a lot of, being able to have deep conversations with people about things that matter. It really opened my eyes to what was going on a bigger scale. And it also, at the same time, validated like a lot of regular people who may not have been seen as like a person of authority to have something to contribute. I just was like, you're awesome. Let's go talk about it, And so it gave a lot of validation to people who may have been overlooked in the past. Then the other major event in my life was when I gave birth to my daughter. That's actually her on a painting I did of her while she was in the womb. And sorry for the pixelated. That's actually a really beautiful photo. Christy Nielsen's an amazing photographer. But this is when I learned about the process of not only developing and carrying a baby, which is a whole thing, but the rhythm of labor is crazy and it follows a pattern if it's not disrupted. I actually had a home birth, which ended up, Christy was there photographing it. How do you say that? And I didn't know, but she put the photos online before I even saw them. So like, I literally have pictures of like my bush on they're down now. But anyway, everybody saw it. So yeah, but it was beautiful. And it was a really amazing experience. And I actually had a painless birth, which I just realized I'm hypermobile. My doctor just diagnosed me like 2 weeks ago. And that means like my bones aren't together enough or something like that. But I think that's why I had such an easy time giving birth, because like everything moved apart easily. And I was like, wow, everything makes sense now. This is when I learned about birth energy is, it's like a freight train going through your body. And so if you're standing next to a freight train, it's a little unnerving. Like if you're like 2 inches away from it, right? But if it's going through your body, it's like crazy unnerving. And I did a whole series of hypnobirthing CDs to like deprogram myself from what we think of birth is. And I was able to allow that energy to go through my body without resisting it, without being in fear of it. And I think that, aside from the hypermobility apparently, I think that's what helped me have a really easy time giving birth. It was a great experience. And I also learned how to not push things and let them arrive when they're ready. And so that was a really, really important lesson that I carried through with everything. Then I took my love for calendars. I've always had a geek interest in astrology because I'm a Leo and I love to think about myself. And so using astrology as like a personal development tool and a maturation evolutionary tool to be like, oh, that sucks about Leos. I'm going to try not to do that, And so that's when I got into celestial cycles, and I ended up creating, this is a couple of my calendars that I do. In Illustrator, it's like got so many layers, you have no idea. But it was a terribly ugly 11 by 17 wireframe when it was first made. So if at first you think you don't have anything, just keep going. And it took me probably about 5 years of refining to get the design acceptable to me. And so now I sell, it's like a side hustle I have, and it's a way to look at time in a circular fashion as opposed to a linear one. And it shows you all the moon cycles, eclipses, and things like that. And so I really got kind of into moon phases and trying to live by the moon phases, and as well as looking at their circadian rhythm and how that affects us. A lot of people don't realize it, but the scientists are figuring out that there's like huge gravitational pulls between us and the planets. And I'm really into something called chronobiology, which is how time affects our biology. The circadian rhythm is one of those. There's like people who hunt and fish by the moon cycles, and that's because there's something about the gravitational pull of the celestial bodies that impact us here. So it's less about, for me, I mean, there's definitely like woo archetypes that go into astrology, but I really strongly believe there's a scientific underpinning to why the planets would affect us the way that they do. Because they do, I'm just gonna tell you. And then I learned, this is not the fun part, this is The Power versus Force, also another really good book that I got at Spiral Circle Bookstore. And this was kind of like the tower moment in my life. Here's my beautiful depiction of this time period. It was a dark time. I lost my business. I ended up letting go of the radio show. And I learned a lot of lessons about toxic work cultures, bullying, cancel culture, like witch hunts, crowds, the whole thing, man. And it was really disappointing because I was like, but I'm a good person. Why is this happening to me? And so it was like one of those tower moments where you lose everything and everything is dark and you don't know why it happened and everything's unfair, which sucks because I have a lot of stuff in Libra and I really need things to be fair. And so I'm not going to go into that because it's a depressing time, but just to say it's part of the cycle, okay? This was like the decay. This is when you have to rest. This is when you have to reflect and pause so that you can be reborn and do things differently the next time. So when we talk about spiral dynamics, people, time isn't just a circle, like I say line and circle, but it's really, evolution is a spiral. So when you're going past the same pattern again, you hopefully are going up a level. You can spiral down. That last slide was about spiraling down, but then you can spiral up. Right? And so you'll face the same kind of pattern again, and hopefully you have learned the lessons down here so that when you face it again, you can do it in a little bit more strategic or smart way. Not everybody does. I hope I'm trying, right? So that led me to, after a lot of reflection, I was like, what happened? How did things fall apart? How did it get so toxic? And I decided it was because I had a male business partner. And so I was like, next time I do this, I'm gonna do this with a female business partner. There was just a lot, not against him, not against men, but like there was just a lot of hidden gender norms and dynamics that I didn't understand, even myself. I was like, no, they're feminism. Look at me, I'm a CEO. No. But then all of those things about like men not listening to you as a leader, like all of those things like actually happened to me. And I was like, this sucks, So I was like, let me try it with a female business partner. And my current business partner, Summer Rodman, she is really just a cool lady. And she wanted to save Spiral Circle Bookstore from demise. The former founder had passed away years ago, but it's this beautiful little bookstore in the Mills 50 district. And she approached me to say, hey, do you want to run this, And I was like, sure, I'm not doing anything. I was, if you want to look at the previous slide, that's what was going on. And so I was like, yeah, let's try to do something else. And that is where I was able to really work with some incredible people, women plus Robbie. Summer's not in this photo because it was her birthday that day, but through working with, this is Shantae, she's my conscious culture director. I knew that community can very easily slide into cult dynamics. And especially running a more spiritual bookstore, I was especially on guard about that. And so I was like, we need to put in some guardrails here. And so we went about spending a lot of time that most people in a startup would not do, making sure that we were creating a culture where people felt empowered to speak, where there was no abuses of power. And it was done in a very conscious way. And it is and was, we had our moments, where we had to look at shadowy stuff. But we really have, I've been there for 5 years now, and we've really created an incredible place to work where everyone's highly engaged, everyone's really empowered, everyone feels like, like in the 80s started like the feminist movement in force. And so we start usually movements start with of course it started with relationships, right? Then now we're hearing about toxic workplaces, right? So once you start to learn those things, you're like, I'm in a terrible relationship with all these people at my office, And so that's where some of these reforms are coming in. And I'm really proud to say we're actually, we talk on the national stage for the booksellers. We give talks at the bookseller conferences about the culture that we've built and how we did it and why we did it and all those different kinds of things. So it was really cool because everything I had experienced at Kinko's, which was, again, I talked about the great culture that was there, and I could kind of halfway do it at Dandelion, but I couldn't completely get it in place, and I never could understand why. And it was because when you talk about community, you have to define the values of that community. You have to define the culture, and you have to get everyone bought into making sure that they're also upholding the culture, because one person cannot uphold the culture. That's a cult. And so we've really created a really beautiful thing, is all I will say about that. And through that, I figured out now I've always done this. I've always been very curious. And when people are doing weird things, I'm not like blaming and shaming them. I'm like, what is going on with that person? And I try to figure it out, right? But I had never really had that same thing returned to me, because any of my weird idiosyncratic behaviors were seen as this thing to like vilify me, especially within a toxic work culture, right? But within my newly created work culture at Spiral Circle, it really created a way for me to be held as a leader, to be able to see, because it was very easy to be like, well, I am acting this way because y'all are toxic, right? And so then it was like a really easy way for me to see I had something else going on. Turns out it was ADHD. I'm one of those statistical late diagnosed ADHD people. I love this. I'm twice exceptional. Now, in school, I was called gifted. I didn't realize until much later that means I was neurodiverse. I just thought it meant I was really awesome. And so I have like a decent IQ. My visual spatial is like really super genius, y'all. Good at problem solving, very creative, very intuitive, very abstract. But I also had, I had figured out I had dyslexia. I figured out I had dyscalculia on my own, which is like flipping numbers and stuff like that. I knew I always taste food as sound, which is why everything that I make in a menu is delicious, because I create a symphony and a harmony there. The things I didn't quite know, I had just like a common understanding of what ADHD, which is based on all these stereotypes, completely divorced from what it actually is. Anyway, it took me a while to finally get a diagnosis, but I got a diagnosis and I was put on medicine, which I come from the organic world. I'm pretty much like, I'm a folk herbalist. I don't really buy into the pharmaceutical world, and oh my God, whatever you judge, you need to experience, because my whole life is turned around by taking medicine. Like I thought my career was over. I thought, I was paralyzed a lot and overwhelmed a lot at Spiral Circle. We were going through a pandemic. It was a hard time, okay? But there was still another explanation for what was going on. And I figured out I have ADHD and an auditory processing thing, which the ADHD medicine actually addresses. So I couldn't listen to podcasts. Not only was I ADHD spacing out in conversations, because I was like, I'm just an absent-minded genius, I was just, and the people who really loved me, they knew and they got it, but my mind was like a riptide ping pong all of the time. And I also had but compounding that, I had an auditory issue. So people would ask me a question and I'd be like, huh? And they would say, and I heard them, but I couldn't, it would not. And so it made it very difficult for me to be in conversations. And so now that I have that fixed, I'm like, oh, I can do anything. It's been, this was just in the last year or two. But I really bring it back to the culture that was able to be like, hey, instead of saying oh, you're just a self-obsessed, jerk, thinking about in your own mind all of the time, to what is going on? Because we know you're a great person, so what is happening? And that curiosity really led me to be in a space to be able to address those things, and be less self-absorbed, I will say that. Despite this lovely presentation that's very Leo. Okay, and so then, after I figured that out, I designed this really cool tool, because I always say everything is a design problem, and if there's something that's challenging and you have two opposing ideas, or two people are feeling really strongly about something, then a third more beautiful thing wants to be born. It's a design problem. I will always go back to it as a design problem. And so I created this wheel, It was based on somebody else's wheel, but I didn't like their wheel, so I made my own. And it's a way for me to do kind of like an audit of different areas of my life and be able to figure out how to prioritize and just really think about things in a conscious way. And so I have like a whole exercise that goes with this. But this has really helped me in the last couple of years as I've been medicated and been able to calm my mind down and be present and really focus on setting priorities and thinking about the different areas of my life and what to address. And I've been watching my life transform in a really positive way since then. So anyway, I've been in a reinvention process for sure. I just launched Front Porch Radio again. Everything kind of paused in the pandemic. And so this is just a couple months ago, and now I'm like gonna podcast it because like that's the thing. Podcasting wasn't a thing back then. So I still do it live on WPRK, but then I am also posting the podcast on Substack. Y'all need to get on Substack. Was I the last to learn about Substack? Because it's amazing. So I've got Front Porch Radio. There's Ana Escamani. She was one of my first guests. She had been a guest of mine several times before she became a politician back in the day. And this is my little girl, Max, who grew up on the radio show. I used to call her the WPRK's youngest DJ because she would be in there talking with me sometimes. And now she actually is. Her show is the hour before mine. It's called Girl Maxing, and she spins live music with her friend. She's like a sophomore in high school. So my Nepo baby for sure. But that's like that cycle repeating, right? Like all of these things that she's been exposed to through me, I can't wait to see what happens in her life. And then I also have been working on those calendars. I've been able to create, it's so funny because I don't like to do things unless I like the design. And like, it took me a while to realize I didn't like the design of my website. And so I stopped kind of paying attention to it. And so now I figured out a really cool way to make these interactive timeline and headline. It's honestly, you guys just have to check it out. But it's a way that astrology isn't done that I've ever seen, where I'm actually correlating, like Pluto is a big deal right now, everyone, what's happening in Pluto. And I can put like the headlines that show like what's happening with the planets in real time. And it's really, really cool. I'm really excited about that. And then what's happening next? This is not the real name because I haven't like done the paperwork yet. But I am going to be opening another little tea cafe inside of Spiral Circle Bookstore, and that is like totally full circle because when I left Dandelion, I never thought I would get back to. I moved away to DeLand. I was gone. I left everything, and then Spiral Circle brought me back to the same intersection, which was wild to me. And now I'm going to be opening up another cafe inside the bookstore in order to stabilize it because. Please come shop at Spiral Circle. Bookstores are tough, but apparently cafes, from everything I hear, help bring in the customer. It's just a diverse revenue stream. Like, well, I have the skills, and I know people like the food I make, so that's probably going to happen sometime next year. I'm going to start doing a crowdfunding campaign for it in the spring, and it'll really help bring back that community gathering vibe because just serve people good food and the party will ensue. So yeah, that is it in a little bit of a personal show of how the cycles have been repeating in my life. And I really encourage people to do an exercise like this of your own and looking back at those childhood moments that left an impression on you and see how they've led you to the next thing. Because it's really fun to be that self-obsessed, Yeah, so thank you. Follow me on Substack because that's really cool. You can find links to all of my projects at Linktree/Julie Wilder. And I would love to have, what do we do now? Questions? Q&A. Okay, cool. Awesome. Right on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have a few minutes for Q&A. If you have any questions for Julie, and if you don't mind, I'll go ahead. No, go ahead, sir. So I was curious, you had so many businesses that you started, and I think a lot of us, designers, illustrators, however we identify ourselves, a lot of us are in a position that we want to start something, but we never quite do. So I was wondering if you had any advice
You're
for the
probably
crew.
ADHD and you need to be on medication.
Sorry?
I said, you're probably ADHD and need to be on medication. Or like for me, I was very passion driven, right? So you have to figure out whether you're negatively motivated or positively motivated. And I'm usually very positively motivated. I'm motivated by design. I'm motivated by creating cultures. I tell people, like, for me, the way it works for me, and this is different for everyone, find the place where your heart breaks. And that is usually where you'll find where your passion is. And I try not to focus so much on the problems. I like to focus on the solutions. But that's one of the things that you have to really examine, because if you don't have the motivation, then you're not going to be able to sustain something. Also learning business jargon, like take some business classes, because a lot of it is just you hit a wall and you don't know what the language is. Like the most important thing that I learned in business school was the vocabulary. That's literally it. Just understanding the vocabulary, and challenging yourself to learn things that they don't teach you in school. The way I learned how to read a profit and loss statement was because of my district manager at Kinko's. She had a class with 5 people in it, and we went through a literal profit and loss statement, and had someone break it down. It's not as complicated as it seems or looks, but you do have to have determination. So having something that really is like an important cause to help drive you, like that's been the motivating thing for me, and it works a little bit different for everyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was very intrigued by the spiral cycles that you talked about. I wonder where would be like a great place to begin investigating like that. I know you said investigate yourself, but
yeah, so Spiral Dynamics is a really good book. It's an old book. Ken Wilber also has a lot of books on integral theory, very heady stuff, okay? But I'm actually also working, and I would love to do this, like just get a group together and go through. I have like this Excel spreadsheet because I'm a geek, and I'm looking at like psychological and spiritual evolution and psychological maturity from like in the womb, based on different states. I mean, this is not stuff that like is taught in classes, right? Childhood development people might have an idea and an understanding of some of these things, but really looking at it on a society level for those patterns, Spiral Dynamics is one of the only books that I've seen that really kind of looks at it. There may have been others published since then. I mean, I read that like probably 20 years ago, but it's a foundational text in it. And it really talks about tribalism, democracies. It really goes through the whole thing, and it's systems change. So anything, like if you need the keywords to Google, you would be looking at systems change. Spiral Dynamics is one of them. Integral theory is the other, and that will lead you into like rabbit holes. I also just got a book on psychosocial development. I cannot remember the name of it. But I've really gotten into I've actually gone from the opposite direction from social to personal. I'll try to post that somewhere too, because that's where I'm really interested, because especially with current events going on right now, I'm like, wow, there's some psychological stuff happening in this world that we need to figure out quickly. And so like that is really cool, but it is all about change. I will say I have an incredible section at my store on business and leadership and community. It's right when you walk in the door, it's the first shelf to the left. Nobody buys from it because they're all coming in for like moon cycle stuff, and because most people work on the personal and then they get to the society stuff. But that shelf has a lot of really cool books on change and navigating change, and also value systems. You really have to understand what the value systems are in order for you to navigate things. But, yeah, no problem.
I think we're all part of and want to benefit from the cultures that we're in by giving back to them. Do you have maybe a method that you found that works well and one that didn't work for you when it comes to articulating the values? That's something that even at 321 we keep thinking about and going back to.
Well, I will say that I talked a lot about community in my Dandelion days, and I articulated a vision of like ecological and kindness and neighborliness and stuff like that. But there was a mistake in terms of like not understanding power dynamics, truly. And I think that is something that everybody needs to study, not just in an experiential way, by like owning your own business or getting into politics or anything like that, but by really understanding like actual power dynamics, because that will really help you set a values framework. We had to do it very intentionally. It's a thought process. It takes time. And so there are some tools that you can use to get there, but it was also a collaborative group process. Because there was something about me, I had designed on my website, Yes Tomorrow Adventures, I had created okay, this is how I operate. Like I was able to like really come up with my own personal philosophy. But then when it came to working at the store and trying to create the culture there, like I needed it to be a collaborative process because I needed everyone to be bought into it. So really encouraging participation and engagement, which also takes a lot into empowerment, because a lot of people, you're the boss and they're they're afraid to speak up and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I really think everyone should study cult dynamics. I mean, honestly, like really getting interested in those kinds of things will really help you just play with different ideas and different ways of being, and seeing how you want to define, like, how do we want to be as a culture here? And in Spiral Circle, we talk about consent a lot, like, because especially me being neurodiverse, I would come in and just be like, blah, 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 all my like drama from the day. And this is just like, they have names for these things. That's trauma dumping, And so being able to figure out what is creating disharmony in the environment. And of course we want to allow for some things like that, but like, hey, go outside if you need to trauma dump, you got to gain consent for that kind of thing. So it really is just about, and it's different for everyone, like what happens in my store may not be applicable. Like I'm actually even thinking about, as I put in the restaurant, there's going to be a little bit of a different value set there than the spiritual store, because we really focus a lot on maturity there, because people are coming in for spiritual guidance. And it's really easy to take advantage of people who are vulnerable like that. And so we very much redirect people back to themselves. But when I'm going to be doing a tea place with herbalism, there may need to be more of a kind of explanatory thing there, because we do have more information than the people that are just our guests. So it really is different based on the culture you're in, the people that you're around, what it is your goals are. And so it really is just about, honestly, looking at power dynamics and thinking about your values in a really important way. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Okay, yeah.
We have time for one more. Let's go ahead, people.
Do you consider yourself more like in the business aspect or the design aspect, like of the roles and everything like that? Because you have a great background in business, but also everything that you've been talking about is like how you use some art to like get to where you are and then help with everything you're doing.
I don't know if I can separate the two. I think, I would have laughed. Okay, I guess when I was younger, if you called me an artist, I would have laughed. Like I didn't identify that way, but everything I do is apparently creative, in whatever way that I do that. So now I would say, I think that's a trick question, actually, because there's this either or thing going on, and a lot of us, we're either this way or that way, and that's kind of like black and white thinking. And for me, I think of it more like a farmer who has like maybe like a permaculture garden. So it's something where you have creative design and you're trying to bring harmony in, but you're also a little bit of a scientist. And you have that pragmatic, experiential, evidence-based thing that you're doing. So I'm primarily a creative social scientist, is what I kind of think of myself as. And like I don't know how to separate the two. I think I'm just fully integrated at this point. But I think I'm just not afraid to fail. And I think that I got that from the creative side because I failed a lot, you guys. Like these are the highlights and the successes, but they've come from failing a lot and getting things wrong and redoing it and reinventing it. It's again that spiral dynamic of going, oh, the aspects of this were good, but then that didn't work, you know? And so it really is just being blameless, shameless, not being afraid to fail, and not being afraid to show up as all of yourself, because a lot of times in the business world, there's that divorce from that creative side, and it's very institutionalized. And that is something that we need to change. We actually need to do systems change is what it's all about, and doing it in a way that invites everyone in instead of shaming them for being this way or that. No.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.